I have a story for us. It's called There's a Hole in the Bucket, and I have the pictures that go along with this. Now, throughout the story, I want you to pay attention to this bucket here, okay? And I'll zoom in really close. Do you see where the hole is? All right? So you got to pay attention to that as we go through the story. Here we go. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole. We'll mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Mend the hole in the bucket, dear Georgie, mend it. With what shall I mend it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I mend it, dear Liza? With what? With a straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a straw, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a straw. The straw is too long, dear Liza, dear Liza. The straw is too long, dear Liza, too long. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Then cut it, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, cut it. Take a look at the hole. With what shall I cut it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I cut it, dear Liza? With what? Well, with a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a knife, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a knife. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, dear Liza. The knife is too blunt, dear Liza, too blunt. Wet the knife then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Wet the knife then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what? With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With a stone, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, a stone. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, dear Liza. The stone is too dry, dear Liza, too dry. Wet the stone then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. Wet the stone then, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, wet it. With what shall I wet it, dear Liza, dear Liza? With what shall I wet it, dear Liza? With what? With the water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. With the water, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, the water. In what shall I get it, dear Liza, dear Liza? In what shall I get it, dear Liza? In what? In the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, dear Georgie. In the bucket, dear Georgie, dear Georgie, the bucket. Wait a minute. But there's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, dear Liza. There's a hole in the bucket, dear Liza, a hole.